A 50-year-old cold case homicide with ties to Mid-Michigan appears to be solved. A man has been arrested for the stabbing death of Nancy Anderson, who at one time lived in Bay City with her family.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another True Crime Mysteries video. Thank you all for being here. Today we're discussing 4 more solved cold cases. But with that being said, let's get into it. Number 1. Nancy Elaine Anderson. On January 7, 1972, 19-year-old Nancy Anderson was in her apartment getting a demonstration from 2 silverware salesmen when her roommate came home around 2:30 p.m. Her roommate, 18-year-old Jody Spooner, joined as the men finished, with neither woman buying any silverware. Jody then went to her room to have a nap. Jody woke up around 5 p.m. She went to the kitchen when she noticed that water was running in Nancy's bathroom, which she thought was odd, as she thought Nancy would have left for work by that time. She discovered Nancy's bedroom door ajar and found Nancy on the bedroom floor bloody. Jody immediately went to a neighbor's apartment and said they needed to call 911 because Nancy had killed herself. Their apartment was in Waikiki, Hawaii, and Nancy had just moved there in October 1971 to have some time before she started college. She was a 1970 John Glenn High School graduate in Bay City, Michigan. She had just returned from a trip home to visit family for Christmas and New Year. Nancy worked at a McDonald's and was known to be very friendly to anyone she met. When police arrived, they discovered that Nancy had multiple stab wounds on her neck, chest, stomach, back, and sides. She also had what looked like defensive wounds, which for police eliminated the chance that they were self-inflicted. Police collected evidence, including several bloody towels and multiple sets of fingerprints. Police interviewed Jody, who said that she'd heard something odd around 4:15 p.m., but hadn't thought much about it because there weren't any further disturbances after that. She also believed that all the doors had been locked, including Jody's bedroom. Police talked to several people in the surrounding area, but no one had heard or seen anything suspicious. Neighbors and acquaintances of Nancy said that she'd been known to be very friendly and often had men come over or to go out on several dates since moving to Hawaii. Police had found evidence that Nancy had opened a bank account at the Bank of Hawaii that day. When they talked to the teller who had assisted her, they said that she'd arrived sometime around 2:15 to 3 p.m., but believed it to be closer to 3 p.m. After the police walked back to the apartment, they put Nancy's time of death between 3:10 p.m. and 5:15 p.m. At first, the 2 salesmen were suspects. They were identified as Parker Graham and Jeffrey Alward, and they volunteered fingerprints and took polygraphs, eliminating them as suspects. Other friends, ex-boyfriends, and co-workers in both Nancy and Jody's life were interviewed, most giving fingerprints and taking polygraphs, eliminating them as suspects as well. During the autopsy, it was discovered that Nancy had been stabbed 60 times with a total of 63 wounds, 3 being exit wounds. The murder weapon was believed to be a knife, 10 millimeters wide and 6 millimeters long. After months of no leads, Nancy's case went cold. In 2001, a DNA profile was made of the blood samples found in 1972. 3 different DNA profiles were found, 2 male and 1 female. Between 2001 and 2004, all past suspects' DNA was tested and were all eliminated as possibilities again. Law enforcement in Honolulu also used DNA that they sent to Parabon Nanolabs, which specializes in DNA phenotyping, which is a type of processing of predicting physical appearances and ancestry from unidentified DNA evidence. They were able to produce a projected sketch of the suspect. In December of 2021, Hawaii cold case detectives got their first break in the case in almost 50 years. An anonymous tip came in that Tudor Chirila should be a suspect in the case. The suspect, now 77 years old, was a lawyer in Reno, Nevada, and had previously run for the Nevada Supreme Court. In 1972, Sherilla had lived less than 3 miles from Nancy Anderson. At the time, he was working as a graduate assistant attorney. In 1995, Sherilla was charged with kidnapping and assaulting a woman that he was in a relationship with. She alleged that he had severely beaten her, trying to render her unconscious to sexually assault her. She managed to escape and press charges, but the case was never convicted. The Hawaii Police Department in February 2022 requested the help of the Reno police in getting a sample of Sherilla's DNA, but they were unsuccessful in getting the DNA covertly. So in March of 2022, they tried something different, and they enlisted Sherilla's son and got DNA from him. The following month in April, he provided the sample, and his identity was confirmed. A warrant was issued on September 1st to collect DNA from Sherilla himself. On September 6th, they finally got the sample. 2 days after law enforcement collected the sample, Tudor Sherilla attempted suicide. However, he was found in time and sent to the hospital where he made a full recovery. On September 12th, it was confirmed that the DNA found at the scene was Sherilla's. He was arrested and held in Reno, Nevada without bail. Hawaii authorities are working on extraditing him, and that hearing is set for early December. Number 2. George Clarence Seitz. It was in early March 2019 when NYPD detectives got a phone call from an anonymous tipster. The now adult said that when she was 11 years old, she saw her mother and stepfather burying black garbage bags in their backyard in 1976. The tipster believed that the garbage bags contained the body of a person and gave the exact location. On March 12, 2019, investigators began searching the property, and human remains were discovered under a concrete slab in the backyard of a home on 1115th Street in Richmond Hill, Queens, New York. It was determined the body had been dismembered at the neck, shoulders, and hips. Over the next few years, the NYPD and the FBI worked to identify the man. Eventually, they would use DNA from the remains to attempt to identify him. Using genetic genealogy, in 2021, they were able to finally identify him, and in doing so, were one step closer to solving his murder. The man was identified as 81-year-old World War I vet George Clarence Seitz, who on December 10, 1976 had left his home in Jamaica, Queens to go get a haircut and was never heard from again. Once George Seitz was identified, police did extensive interviews and scoured records, trying to find as much evidence as they could to point to a suspect. And they found a suspect, and it was the owner of a barber shop that Seitz frequented. 74-year-old Martin Mata was identified and confessed. He was later charged with second-degree murder. Mata had stated that he had killed Seitz and robbed him for the $7,000 to $8,000 he had on him. Seitz was known to distrust banks from war times, and he was known to carry large sums of money on him at all times. Mata claimed that he stabbed Seitz in the head, dismembered his body, and buried it in the backyard. He was arrested without incident. In October 2022, he pled guilty to first-degree manslaughter after taking a plea agreement. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison.
Frankly, you're like Queens' own Jeffrey Dahmer Light. I hope they had hard, terrible years.
Instead of getting a haircut, he got robbed, killed, dismembered, and buried in the backyard where nobody would find him for 45 years.
My mother died never knowing what had happened to her brother. My hope is that each day you spend in prison, you will think of your evil actions, the suffering my uncle must have endured.
Melinda Katz, District Attorney for Queens, said in a press conference, quote, "After 46 years, a veteran of First World War gets justice. The successes of modern technology and forensics made it possible for us to not only identify the remains of the victim, but also to find any witnesses. When I became district attorney, I created the cold case unit for cases such as this, where time seems to be the enemy. Time allowed forensic genetic genealogy and our investigators to catch up to this defendant." End quote. Number 3. Claire K. Holman. On March 24, 1994, a friend and neighbor came to deliver mail to her senior neighbor, Claire K. Holman, in Barajo Springs, San Diego, California. She knocked on the door, but there was no answer, which was odd. She peeked into one of the front windows and saw that the home inside was ransacked. Miss K. Holman was found deceased in her home. The 72-year-old widow and former hairdresser had owned a shop in town for many years, but was now retired. There were no signs of forced entry in her home, so investigators believe that she either knew her attacker or they were familiar with her routine. An autopsy showed that she had been strangled with a rope or cord, and her death was ruled a homicide. After months of investigation and no leads, her case went cold. In 2003, the San Diego County Sheriff's Department got a DNA profile from the evidence that was discovered at the scene. They entered the results into CODIS, the federal database of DNA for unsolved crimes, but they didn't get any matches from that. In March of 2021, they would try again, but this time with genetic genealogy in the hopes of finding a suspect. The evidence from the crime scene was re-examined and they found a single hair with foreign male DNA. With that, they were able to find 118 distant relatives of the suspect. For several months, they combed through and narrowed down all of the relatives until they honed in on a single suspect. In September 2022, it was announced that a suspect had been identified, Jerry Dwayne Robinson. Robinson had been a plumber in the area and may have worked for Claire Holman on occasion. Robinson died 15 years ago in 2007 from cancer. A paternity test was used to confirm the DNA from the suspect matched Robinson's. At the time of the killing, he was 51 years old. It is also believed the motive was robbery and sexual assault. Both the Holman and Robinson families have been informed, and the San Diego County Sheriff's Department considers the case closed. Number 4. Sandra Felice. It was the day after Christmas in 1980 when 25-year-old Sandra Felice was found in her Las Vegas home brutally beaten to death and sexually assaulted around 9:30 p.m. She was found in her bed under the covers. She lived at the house with a roommate and her 3-year-old daughter. Fortunately, the daughter was not at home at the time. She had been staying with her grandparents. Investigators collected a vast quantity of evidence, including foreign dark hairs, a glass with a fingerprint, and a sexual assault kit. The young mother was recently divorced and worked as a waitress to support herself and her daughter. Her ex-husband was initially the lead suspect, but was quickly cleared. Days of the investigation turned to months, which turned to years, and Sandra's case went cold. In December of 2021, the Las Vegas Cold Case Unit got a call from Sandra's daughter, now in her 40s, asking for any updates on her mother's case. This made cold case detectives re-examine the case with fresh eyes. They found fingernail scrapings under Sandra's sexual assault kit that could now be tested with new DNA technology available. They found male DNA in the sample. The sample pointed to a suspect, 64-year-old Paul Nuttall.
After Paul Nuttall was taken into custody, my cold case investigators had the pleasure of making the one phone call that every cold case detective wants to make, and that was to call the family member, specifically Sandra Felice's daughter, and it let her know that there had been a development in the case and that we had arrested the suspect who was responsible for the murder of Sandra Felice. I am hopeful that in some way, shape, or form this provides some sort of closure for the family and ultimately results in some type of closure and justice for Sandra.
Nuttall had been detained for questioning in the original investigation but had been released. Police went and spoke with Nuttall, showing him a picture of Sandra and asking if he remembered her. About her murder, he responded by saying he didn't know what they were talking about, and at that time they also got a DNA sample from Nuttall. He had been the initial suspect as his fingerprints had been found on the glass received from Sandra's house. Sandra's roommate was a friend of Nuttall at the time, and she explained that she had given Nuttall the drink when he had asked for a place to stay for the night as he had nowhere else to go, but she had told him no because Sandra was sleeping and she didn't know him well. The roommate claimed that she escorted him out of the house before leaving as well. The roommate is now deceased. Nuttall would have been 21 years old at the time. The DNA was a confirmed match for Nuttall, and he was arrested. He is being held without bail and is currently waiting for his next court appearance. They believe sexual assault and robbery was the motive. Homicide Lieutenant Jason Johnson said in a statement to the media, quote, "After he was taken into custody, my cold case investigators had the pleasure of making the one phone call that every cold case detective wants to make. They were able to inform De Felice's daughter the man suspected of murdering her mother was in custody. There is a concern that Nuttall has dementia and will be undergoing evaluations before the trial. LVMPD is looking to see if there are any more victims linked to Nuttall, who has resided in Las Vegas his whole life. After 4 decades, Sandra Felice will finally get justice." Well, that is it for this video. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you like this content and what I do over here, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss my next upload. If you give this video a like if you enjoyed the content, that would be much appreciated as it helps the channel to grow. We also have channel membership and Patreon if you want to get more behind the scenes content as well as exclusive content or just to support the channel. In the description box of this video, you will also find links to all my socials to connect with me, as well as other goodies. But that is it from me. Thank you so much for being here. I will see you on the next one. Bye for now.